this country might soon disappear. And this isn't a doomsday prophecy or due to climate change. It's because Japan's population itself is shrinking. While birth rates are slowing in a bunch of countries, including Japan's neighbor China, the issue is particularly acute in Japan. Earlier this year, Japan's Prime Minister's aide, Masako Mori, said if Japan's population continues to progress like this, the country will soon disappear. Japan is constantly introducing new policies, measures, and financing, all to boost its population. And when I say that it has tried everything, believe me, Japan actually has tried everything. Last year, Japan's Minister Masanobu Okura tried out a pregnant belly weighing 7.3 kgs to address the declining population. In fact, a Japanese citizen even created life-size dolls and scattered them across her village to inject some life into the town that had no children left. Even Japanese filmmakers have written plots around it. Japan's Oscar submission this year is a dystopian film, Plan 75, a film that paints a grim future of Japan where government passes a law that offers voluntary euthanasia to people above 75 years of age. But why is Japan in this state? Let's gauge that situation on the basis of a 13-year trend. In 2010, Japan had a population of 128 million. In 2015, it dropped to 127 million. Now, in 2023, its population is 125 million. So basically, if you look at it, between 2010 and 2023, Japan basically just lost 3 million people. As per projections, by 2060, Japan's population would be just 86.7 million. So the main role player here is the age factor. Japan has a grey population, which means that the country's demography is over 80 years of age. And for the first time, 1 in 10 people in Japan are 80 years or older. Japan has one of the lowest birth rates in the world. So for any country to maintain its population growth, minimum required birth rate is 2.1 children per woman. Japan's birth rate is currently at 1.36, which is far below the average requirement. But as we see that Japan is dealing with its population fallout, what is the government really doing to address it? In January 2023, the government offered $7,500 to families to move out of Tokyo. It was to bolster the population in these regions. And Japan's Prime Minister Kishida said the government would double spending on child-related programs. In another policy, the country introduced an annual funding of 3.5 trillion yen to curb the falling birth rate. But despite its elaborate plans, Japan has failed to boost its population. And why is that? When compared, Japan has a restrictive immigration policy. It also has more people living in self-imposed isolation and more youngsters choosing to live in the cities. The country's life expectancy has also risen in the past few years. As per 2020 data, Japan's life expectancy stood at 84.6 years, ranking third in the world after China's Hong Kong and Macau. Besides other demographic factors, many youngsters in Japan prefer to remain single. According to a data, 1/3 of youngsters in Japan don't see a point of getting married or having kids. And reasons being Japan's higher cost of living, youngsters choosing freedom of singlehood, and believe it or not, wanting to spend more money on themselves. Shrinking population causes drastic changes to country's economic and socio-political landscape. There's a huge strain on the workforce as the aging population has to continue working. So in Japan, people who had retired are now retraining. But Japan is not the only country in the world that is seeing a shrinking population. Countries like Bulgaria, Lithuania, Latvia are experiencing a similar shrinking population pattern. But as we think about shrinking population, we can also see that India is seeing a population boom. So the question that arises here is if the world has too many or too few people. The truth is that population increase and decrease cannot be predicted or can't be planned as per a country's policies. But why do we say this? Back in 1979, China introduced one-child policy to prevent the estimated 400 million births. But in contradiction, the same country now, 44 years later, is funding its people to give birth to more children. So as per the World Population Prospects made in 2017, the global population has been on the rise since 1800. Where in 2022, we reached 8 billion people. But to reach 9 billion, the world will take 14 more years. As you can see in the graph, the addition of each million to the world's population is taking more and more time. So if we are to compare population of the countries over the years, much of the global north is seeing a low birth rate as compared to the global south. But if we are to analyze the world demography for say the next 50 years, quite frankly, these predictions might never turn out to be true. Population shrinkage and growth depends on n number of factors. For instance, the economy or a pandemic like COVID-19 which affected millions, or climate change as we see today. So while we can definitely make calculated predictions based on current factors, the actual changes in population and demography plays out in a much more complex way.